Good afternoon, right? What time is it over
Good
there?
morning to you.
7?
Yes,
Yeah. Well, it's 12 here
7.
technically. How are you?
So, how have you been? It's been a while.
Yeah, it's been like a month. It's been a minute
Mhm.
now. Things are pretty
Mhm.
good. Just doing my own thing, just working through you and I have been working a lot through, taking a lot of those things into account, trying to strengthen a lot of heart centeredness, focus on a lot of heart centeredness exercises. I've been
Yes.
doing that. What about you? You moved, right?
Well, yes, I'm now working full time in this beautiful work what I've been doing since 2016. So, and I'm enjoying it very much.
Yeah.
Mhm.
That's crazy. I'm really happy to hear that. So full time you do peak states work?
Peak states, coaching, therapy, whatever is needed, and it's personal development and therapy, and yeah, it's cool.
Cool. Cool. What kind of work have you been getting the most? What do people usually come to you for
Peak
the
states
most?
work. Peak
Peak
states
states
work.
work?
Yeah, so personal development, and in that included is some sort of therapy as well, because there's always a pet peeve or something else that you have and everybody has in their lives, and that we work on. And then when it goes away, then there's new perspective, and it feels
Hmm.
nice.
Yeah, that
And
makes
then
sense.
there are peak states, and my clients also get these peak states, these higher levels of consciousness, and that feels amazing for them. And yeah, and that's something I enjoy helping people get into.
Cool. Well, I'm happy to hear that you transitioned to do that full time. Sounds like that's what you wanted to do, right?
Yes, exactly.
That's great. That's great. Well, then let's. I think that's a great transition to what I kind of wanted to talk about today on podcast number 19, which
Yay, 19.
yeah, I know. Which I wanted to label the theme that I wanted to talk about for this podcast, and let me know what you think. Is I think we should focus on the language of emotions and how that um, it relates to the unconscious and our conscious selves. Um, the main reason I wanted to talk to you about this was because I want to share a story, and I think it could benefit quite a number of people. So, put on your seatbelt, folks. I've been dealing with. I'm 29, and I've been dealing with back pain for a long time, off and on for many years. It's really never bothered me too much. I've been able to do things just fine. It's only been this past 2 years that it's been an issue, and gradually becoming more and more of an issue. And as anybody who deals with any kind of chronic issue, it always moves over not to just like the physical side, but it starts affecting your emotional side as well. There are things you might feel like you can't do much about it. You might feel helpless. You might feel upset, angry. You might feel sad about limitations that kind of happen in your life. You might feel many, many things, right? And I've always been the kind of person that assumes that a lot of the things that happen to us in our lives have to do with our emotions or our psyche. But this one I just couldn't figure out, right? It was just like there, you look at MRIs and I mean, the proof is there that there's something, there's this degeneration in my perspective in my life. And you and I talk so much about these things and about the emotional side, how it affects not just our behaviors, our perspective, our how we feel, and how we think about ourselves, but it also affects our bodies, right? We've had a couple of conversations about psychosomatic stuff.
Right.
Now, I stumbled upon a book and about the work of a doctor called Dr. Sarno, who was an MD. I think he's retired now. And he's really controversial in the fact that he's been, he was a back doctor for decades and well known. I don't know about well respected within the community, because what he postulated was that a lot of the issues that people have with back problems are psychosomatic. And he didn't mean that the things that were happening weren't real, but that the pain that became localized in people's backs and in parts of their body was an attempt for the body to take away their emotional pain, the repressed issues, the things they weren't dealing with, their personality traits that were a burden, and it was putting all the pain in their back or in a certain aspect, so that their awareness was there rather than with the things they were being upset about. And a lot of the work that he does with people, they got way better. And if you go online, there's so many testimonials of people who were in the worst states, and they started doing what he said, which was a lot of it was, start writing all the things that upset you. Just start writing the things that you don't like about your life, what's going on. Just start writing about it. And within weeks to months, people that, were on wheelchairs because of the pain, had sciatica, all these things, their symptoms just went away. And when it would come back, everybody, and not everybody, but so many people I would see would say, they would reread the book and they would get better again. They would get cured, more or less. Those symptoms would go away. And I found that so interesting, because it's one of those aspects that is at the fringes of how we talk about science, what science can do for us right now. There's so many things that the medical model can do, but there's still some limitations. And you see it with doctors that wouldn't want to go to him because it would affect how they perceive themselves. And it just got me thinking about the unconscious and the conscious. So there are these things that we can kind of see. To me, it seemed like all those things that people are dealing with, based on the story I just said, have to do with things that aren't totally we're not consciously aware of. However, they still affect our body in ways that are very, very direct. Does that make sense? What do you think about that story? What do you think about what I kind of just told you? Does that make sense? Does that sound just absolutely crazy? I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Well, it makes much sense to me. And thank you very much for bringing that up, because to my understanding, there is some truth. So in the medical community, I think, I don't know if the number is really 100% correct, but I think around 70% of back pain is known to be psychosomatic origin. At least in Germany, that's what we say. So when you start operating on that, obviously it might change something, but it might not cure or make it better.
Sure.
And there's a field in medicine called psychosomatics. So it's known that our inner world affects our health. It's not only the step wound or the car accident or the infection that we get from the outside, but there's something inside of us causing disease, especially chronic disease. And it's no new science, as I said. There's a field, there's a specialization for psychosomatic, and it has much to do with what we've been talking about emotion, talking about trauma. It has much to do with that. Unfortunately, or perhaps even that is a good thing, we have a subconscious or unconscious part and a conscious part. And when we start to believe that the conscious part is everything there is, then I think life is getting troublesome. Most people do that, okay? They think about what they think, they know about what they know, and they just go on with their life, believing that this is all. To my understanding, it's just 5% of our lives. So it's very, very little to compared to the rest, to the subconscious or the unconscious part of us. I mean, it's nice to not need to know how much milliliters of volume of air the lungs pump in and out every time. I wouldn't want to deal with that. I'm happy that my body does that on its own. The same thing with my heart rate. If I'm running, then it should adjust. It should be lower now when we're just talking.
Yeah.
And the same with the bile, with the liver. So there's so many things in our body which need to work, which if we would have that data like on a screen, like on a
we wouldn't have enough hands.
Smart glass or something. There would be so much data we couldn't see.
Oh my God. Yeah, I see.
So I'm happy that there's part of me that takes care of it.
Right.
And I don't have to take care of it when I'm talking to you, for example. So I can focus on talking to you and trying to pronounce the words in a good way so they can be understood and not take care of what is my inner working. Then there is the thing that if I have something which emotionally triggers me, I have to deal with it. And there are basically 3 ways you can deal with it. You can surrender to it and start crying and just give in. Okay, so there's an emotional upset and you just surrender to it. Or you can try to avoid. And avoiding is anything from binge watching Netflix to binge eating to running around, doing sports, excessive sports, to, I don't know, to try to ignore it, swipe it under the rug, or other things. And then there's overcompensate or fight it. So when I have something inside of me going on, and for example, I feel small, then I can put myself in a way that I'm big, that I'm showing up, that I'm getting famous, that I'm perhaps an influencer, social media influencer. And deep inside, I feel small, but with that overcompensation, basically balances it out. So these are the 3 basic mechanisms we can use with our emotions, and then we can do in the more details to them, or we can heal them. Okay, we can see what is that emotional upset, what triggered me, and what is triggered, and then we work with these techniques we've been talking about,
right?
And then we resolve it, and then there is no need for this coping mechanism of surrendering, avoiding, or overcompensation. And especially when we talk about psychosomatic, I think many people go to this strategy, this coping strategy of swiping it under the rug, trying to ignore it.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Perhaps that's what they heard from their parents. Yeah. So many boys might have heard a sentence like "boys don't cry." Okay. So if something happens inside of you, deal with it, but don't cry, don't show it. Okay. And so boys try to, I don't know, swipe it under the rug, look the other way, try to avoid it. And if that becomes a habit, whenever there's an emotional upset, not working with it, not paying attention to it, then that can accumulate and perhaps surface as back pain, as a somatic symptom, as a symptom of the body. And and then we have this issue that 70% of the back pain possibly is because we haven't dealt with emotions for 20 years, for 30 years, and now our body says, "Hey, here's something, deal with it."
Yeah.
And instead of doing that, we run to the doctor and take an MRI, a CAT scan, MRI, and getting an operation. And the patient says, "Hey, here, I'm here. Yeah, deal with me," and we don't. And the interesting thing is that, and that is something I thought about this morning, that there are other traumas, there are other fears which might promote this kind of behavior. So, for example, if I have a fear of life itself, and we know the fear of death or fear of dying, and we try to avoid not to talk about death and so on, and basically exclude it from our lives. And then when loved one or when some friend or so die, then we basically resort to stereotypical things because we don't know what to do. And there's the opposite. There's also fear of life because life might be so dangerous.
Right.
And the interesting thing is what I've been thinking about today is, especially when we meet people who are very rigid in their mindset, might that be a very strong fear of life? Because with that rigidity, with that rule-based mindset, there's control. And with that control, you feel more safe. Okay. So when you have a fear of life, you might say, okay, life, emotions, I can't handle that. I swipe it on the rug. Okay. That's the mechanism to deal with it. And then, some years later, the body says, hey, I'm here. Please take care.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It makes perfect sense. It's super interesting. And I mean, I think that's like a unique perspective that I love talking to you about because it's something that you can share very well. And that's kind of why I want to talk about this subject, as as deep as I can with you, because I feel like you're gonna be able to provide great insight. And I wish you could clarify some things for me, because I also don't think it's not a very common sense logical step to think that for the most part, I think that once you don't deal with a symptom, an emotional issue enough, that then it's going to become something physical. I don't think it's necessarily a logical step to think my back issue, or my headaches, maybe the headaches a bit more, but like my back issue is due to, anger or fear. I don't think, I think it's normal that people wouldn't assume that or even want to believe that right away. But the reason I wanted the topic and the theme to be about the language of emotions is because in a way that is communicating something, right? The back is saying, like you're saying, like, hello, like I'm here, this is happening. The underlying theme, I wanted it to be about the conscious and the unconscious, is because I actively work on myself. I have for many years. I've done therapy. I work with you. I'm learning new techniques. For a very long time, I dealt with a lot of dissociation. And less so now. It's very, very rare that I feel dissociated, and it's a great feeling. But it's also come from the fact that I actively have been working to, not just with you, but with myself, to become more aware of my emotions, to gain strength, to be present without feeling overwhelmed, to start to recognize emotions again. And sometimes I feel like not everything presents to you itself in this platter, like fear or anger or sadness, and you can see it, and you can not just feel it, but be aware of what's causing it. Sometimes you might just feel heaviness in your chest, or tightness in your shoulders or in your neck, or something in your gut, and you don't really know why you feel this way. There is not a part of you so connected to yourself that says you are feeling X because of Y. And that's what it makes me think about my back. It kind of frustrates me, to be honest, because I think I work on my stuff actively. I guess I'm just not aware what it is that I need to work on with my back specifically. And that kind of sucks. So sometimes I feel like there are, and we talked about this a few weeks ago, and I've heard it before, that sometimes doing healing work or even dealing with your issues is kind of like peeling an onion. And there are layers, right? You said there are layers. And sometimes you heal something and something new comes up. But I feel like sometimes as a normal human being, you might be able to see the top layer in the things in your life that you are aware you are dealing with, whether it's frustration with a job or you're moving and you're stressed, all these things, right? But sometimes the things that affect you are the things that are underneath that layer that you can't even see. So even your unconscious things that you don't even know are going on still affect you. And that seems kind of unfair. So does that make sense? Like, what are we supposed to do about those things? Most people are already actively working on the main things in their life that they can see are affecting them. And that's not even everybody. Now we have this underlying layer that still shows up, even if we're not totally consciously aware of it. So what can we do about those things? Does that make sense to you, first of all?
Yes, it makes sense. And and I like that you said it's unfair, because yes, from the perspective of the conscious who wants to feel better, who wants to feel in peace and so on, it feels so unfair that there is a subconscious who is holding some secrets and making you pain. Yeah.
Sure.
So
sure.
That is a very good point of view. But actually, that's the point of view that causes you not to feel these things and to know these things, because you actively separate yourself, you from the subconscious. Okay, but it is called this way, but it's actually inside yourself. It's not that separate. There's not a wall inside of you, and this is the part you know, and this is the part you don't know. And I think everybody knows, when I tell this small example, what I mean. When you lost your keys, okay? Imagine you're wanting to leave your house and the keys are not there. And then you start thinking very hard, thinking very hard. Where did I put my keys? You try to retrace your steps. When did I see them last? Did I see them last yesterday evening? Yes. And yesterday evening, I put them there. I 100% know that I put them there.
Mm-hmm.
But you won't find them. Most of the time, people don't find them doing this.
Yeah.
Then they sit down in the kitchen, make themselves a tea or coffee, look in the newspaper, and boom, my keys are, and then you know.
Right.
Okay. So this is an example when you have bridged the gap between the conscious and the subconscious by relaxing. The subconscious basically gives you that information because it's part of you. It likes you. It's really likes you. It supports you. Otherwise, it wouldn't take care of your heart rate, of your breathing, and so on. Just if we don't want to see it, and if we use it, for example, to store things that we don't like, okay, we just, as I said, swiping on the rug, putting it to the subconscious part. Well, then we actively separate ourselves from that part of us. And having a one-to-one connection right now and knowing everything what your subconscious might not know would be incredibly overwhelming. So that there's a gap, that there's a barrier, is actually something which I think is at the beginning really cool because there's so much stuff that you need to look at when you start doing this work.
Yeah.
So when you and that is my recommendation, that you switch your point of view, meaning that there is no unfairness, but that there is reason and logic to everything. Just perhaps you haven't understood it yet. Okay. So try to leave that little bit arrogant point of view. Look, you know everything, and that is unfair, and I'm the victim, and they did that to me, and switch it and turn it around to say, okay, perhaps I am not yet capable of understanding everything. But I know there's a subconscious, and I know that the thing is supporting me. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here right now. I wouldn't breathe, I wouldn't digest, I wouldn't do anything. And then, with that positive point of view, not blaming, not shaming, not saying swear words at your subconscious, perhaps, then your subconscious also will change and will be getting closer to you, and the gap between both will narrow, and then you will be more and more aware of what's going on inside of you. But it's a process because 29 years you have been living the other way around, and now you have to switch it. Okay, so in 29 years, I hope much quicker, perhaps within a year, you will see that there's like, oh, now I understand. Oh, now it makes sense. Oh, that's the reason why I don't like dark streets or something. Okay, because then your subconscious communicates that, like with the key, much quicker. Okay, so basically both parts come closer together. And of course, we talked about the triune brain model of the Institute for the Study of Peak States, where the triune brains resemble the awarenesses that make our conjoint awareness. And part of these awareness basically form the subconscious part that we've been talking about. And when they are not so much struggling, when they have less trauma, and when they are emerging more and more, and at the end, that would be the peak states, the hollow peak state, where all the triune brains are merged 100%, and you basically feel hollow inside, you're like a ball. Then every thought basically is from the conscious to the subconscious. It's like, okay, that's the thing. You know everything. You know everything inside of you. You know everything what's going to happen. You're aware of your different emotions towards a certain situation or a certain trigger.
Right.
This is something I just can tell you, but it's difficult to understand right now if you don't have that experience. So the first step is to take that example with the key. Be kind, be relaxing, not stressed, and not yell at yourself. Yeah, for example, I heard many times in the psychological field, in the psychological communication community, the term self-sabotage.
Yeah, we've talked about this.
I would be the subconscious, and I would have a habit which the conscious doesn't like, and the conscious calls it self-sabotage. Look, the finger. Okay, I would not communicate with that. If that part is blaming me, I don't need to communicate with them. And then let them do their thing, and I do my thing, and then the gap widens. It's really about the perspective you are having and the perspective you are taking towards yourself.
Right. Sometimes in certain fields, you'll see this more. This language, when people say they have kind of like an existential crisis, or they call it like an ego death or a dark night of the soul, is what's happening that this conscious and subconscious barrier just kind of breaks down, and then you're flooded with a lot of subconscious material?
Well, if the crisis, yes, I would say the crisis is basically there's too much information, too much data, too much emotions flooding you, and we call that trauma flooding. And the inner peace process would be a way to prevent that. And the dark night of the soul, basically, I think is more that this concept of that you have of yourself, of what you are and what you resemble, that this basically slowly or quickly, depending on what's happening, is going away. And this obviously is like, okay, so what do I do? If I'm not that anymore, I know now that I'm not that, or this or that. What do I do then? Mm-hmm. And then depending on how you react to being irritated or being somewhere without direction, then depends on how you react to that. If that is a trigger, then of course it's a crisis. And if you say, oh, finally I feel this way. I read so many books about Eckhart Tolle. I read so many spiritual books, and now it happens to me, and I welcome that situation. Yay. Okay. So then it's not a crisis. It really depends on how you compute that data, compute that situation.
That's really, really interesting. And a lot of it makes, I really like it. It's really interesting.
Very thoughtful, a very deep topic today.
Yeah. I mean, I just think that sometimes I feel like do this type of work, and I know it's going to sound dumb because it's not, but it feels very simple and at the same time very complex. Like, we're talking about the same thing. We're talking about this one aspect, which is like trauma and emotions. And it's very simple that's all you have to work on. But, once you open it up, there's so much going on. Human beings are so complex. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And one of the things you were talking about, for example, is that you were saying, don't attack your subconscious. And I'm still a little bit, actually, I'm stuck on two things. I'm stuck on when you're talking about too much information being flooded. And you were talking about a peak states that kind of helps you not go through that. But you're also saying, the closer the barrier, the better the connection between you and your subconscious. But you're not saying, I'm pretty sure you're not saying this, that, the more connected you are to your subconscious, the easier it is you're going to have trauma flooding, right? Because how do I put it? Like, if there is a part of you that's self-sabotaging, right? And you attack that subconscious part of yourself, then you bridge the gap. And in a certain way, that can kind of protect you from the things that it's giving you.
If you
so you don't get potentially flooded. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but think about that sentence for a second. That implies that subconscious is doing you harm.
Right. And it's not.
Perhaps trauma flooding is just its way of dealing with the situation. And it's not, the intention is not doing you harm.
Right. It's a way of communicating, right?
Perhaps perhaps it's a situation which is unpleasant, definitely. Okay, so that there's no doubt about it. But we always need to have some sort of homeostasis in our bodies. We also always have to have some sort of balance. If we're out of balance, we die. Okay. If we have a pH balance, is out of balance, we die. If we have salt levels out of balance, and everything needs to be in a perfect and temperature. That's even closer for many people to understand. If the temperature is too high, we die. If it's too low, we die. If we have too much water, we die. If we have too little water, we die. So everything needs to be in perfect balance. And that's part of our subconscious taking care of that. And now, if I would like to introduce a new model, a new way of thinking, which makes it perhaps easier to change the perspective from being the victim to being part of the whole thing. Imagine a factory. Okay, and in that factory, there are many lines of production, many lines, too many to count. Okay, very complex factory. And that factory produces stuff. And that stuff that's produced in the factory, that is delivered outside. And there are outside workshops that take the stuff that the factory produced and they make it nice. Okay, put bells and whistles on that and then they use it. Okay, so they produce cars, perhaps these outside workshops, and the factory produces the steel and the stuff you need to put in cars. And then there are other things that produce tools for the gardening. And then there are people who use these things that these workshops create. So the factory creates the basic stuff and then delivers towards the workshops. And these workshops create things that other people outside or very close to them use.
Mm-hmm.
And now there's a fire in the factory, but not in the whole factory, but in the part of the factory.
Yeah.
What should the factory do? Should the factory now shut down completely? And then not only this part, but all the other thousands parts of the factory will shut down. So nobody around that gets any materials. Or should the factory sound an alarm to get people to put out that fire? But just in that part, the rest of the factory continues to work. What do you think? What's the most efficient thing for the factory?
Just to continue working.
Right, continue working and just sound the alarm for that part, so people come and work with that and fix that fire. And now imagine emotions being exactly that alarm. Okay, your body's sounding an alarm that there is something not working. Pay attention. Use tools to put out the fire. Okay, so I think it's a very smart way for the body, but it's not very smart from human beings to ignore these alarms, because then this one part of the factory will burn down, then another part of the factory will burn down. It's a huge factory. Okay, it's a huge factory, but still there are parts of the factory, it looks like a Swiss cheese afterwards, which is not cool for the factory and for the whole production. And then all these workshops, well, they want to work. So they now say, okay, the factory doesn't deliver that part anymore to me. So now I need to go to get that other part and reconfigure it so I can create the tools that I need to do. So the work in the workshop gets much more difficult. And there can be a problem as well. The workshop can catch fire as well. So the workshop needs to sound an alarm as well. That's an emotion. Okay, and then we still say, nope, we're ignoring it, swiping it on the rug. So now parts of the factory don't work and the workshop start not working.
Yeah.
So, and eventually somebody says, look at all that mess here, please clean it up.
Yeah.
And then that's what we are doing with the peak states work. That's just a metaphor to just an image to put it. But that's basically how we think this works in our primary cell, in all of our cells. We have the nucleus, which is the factory which produces the proteins, or the mRNA, which is the pre-substance for the proteins. And then we have these workshops, they're producing the proteins, and the proteins basically are the enzymes, the hormones, and everything that our body uses.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and then the emotions are basically alarms, something is not right.
Right.
And that's wrong.
It's a good analogy. But in this aspect, you're talking about just how in the factory, you're talking about everything that you talked about, every part of the factory. Are these just all emotions, or are these all also biological systems in the body? Like, are you talking about also like the organs, and you're talking about the heart and these things?
I'm smaller. I'm going smaller. So this is on the cell level. So basically, organs are made of tissues, and tissues are made out of cells. And the factory basically is every cell is a factory. Not even a factory. If every cell is an ecosystem of factory plus workshops plus users.
Yeah.
It's each and every cell in the cell is incredibly small, and that is all inside that cell. Okay, right. And the cell sounds the alarm if something goes wrong. Mm-hmm. And I think we should look at it. Okay, so and as much as we can, there might be something which we cannot look at, because it's too overwhelming, or we don't have the right tools to fix it. Okay, because it's not it's a fire of a different kind of material, whatever. If you take that analogy, but there are fires we can easily turn out, put out.
Yeah, put out. Yeah. Okay, that's a great analogy. And I know that Peak States focuses on that, and that's a model that more and more hopefully can be expanded on and improved on more. And I know you guys are trying to do that more and more, right? Yeah, that's
it's very simple technique. So it's overwhelming. Yes, it's horrible emotions because we are not used to them at first.
sure.
But eventually it gets more and more to routine, like you're doing your hair or whatever, doing your
Right.
shaving or something like this. It gets more to routine. And then it's just becomes part of your life that you notice something and you clean it up. You notice something, clean up. And at the beginning, it's even more. And then later, it's less. Yeah?
Right.
All the fires are put out and the factory starts working again and the workshops start working again. And then it feels nice. And actually, when this whole ecosystem of factory and workshops and users works well in a certain part, that's a peak state. Okay. So
Right.
things work better and they work in harmony, they're in flow, and everybody's happy. So it's a peak state. And if that somewhere is broken, then you lose your peak state.
Right. Great analogy. I like that analogy a lot. Well, I'm going to put a difficult one on you. So that we can start bridging the gap between people that are kind of listening to this and, are on the fringes of trying out, maybe talking to you, maybe talking to somebody else, maybe just asking questions. What is something anyone can begin doing to kind of understand these things within themselves without necessarily having to heal anything, but maybe just to become more aware of this language of emotion, of, how emotions manifest, what we can do about these triggers, what we can do maybe about, just being more aware, being more present with them, so that this stuff that we just talked about makes sense in their experiential lives.
The great question. And I think rewatching that episode we're doing right now would be a first start, because this analogy with the factory is beautiful, because if that workshop owner can produce your tool that you need when you are the user, you can shout with the workshop owner, but perhaps that workshop owner says, well, you can shout as long as you like. If the factory doesn't deliver the materials, it's going to be very difficult for me to create the tools. And so perhaps the shouting at the workshop owner and demanding and being arrogant about needing the tools and so on is not the way, but perhaps the cooperation. Okay, you can say, hey, workshop owner, I understand it's difficult for you. I understand you can't get the materials, but I know that other workshop that has materials which you could use, and I can bring it to you, and then we worked on it together in a cooperative way. And that is this very kind way of talking to yourself, basically. Yeah? The way you would talk to the workshop owner in a kind way and not demanding, arrogant way.
Yeah.
Or what's that, entitled way or something? But instead, you'll be very gentle. What's the issue? Can I help you with anything? And if you start talking to you in the same way, thinking about yourself in the same way, understanding these small implied things about yourself, about how you think about the world, what should be there, what shouldn't be there. Try to scrape everything. Everything is not necessary. Must everything, get rid of that.
Okay.
And start using your perspective to be kind. And that's the first step. And the next step is, for example, this loving yourself meditation we have here on YouTube is also very nice, because then you start feeling something positive. Okay, that was now a mental exercise, being kind and remembering yourself of being kind. But if you feel inside this loving feeling, and not this hate and not this anger and not this frustration, then it's easier to be kind. Yeah, but it's a two-way street. You can start thinking kind ways, and then this changes slowly, and you can change here the emotion part, and then you will think. So there's a feedback in between them.
Yeah.
So this is what I would say is the first thing. And when you notice that there are some small changes in the way you think, and the way you feel, and the way you react, perhaps, then it's a good sign. That means something can be done. And then I would go into the healing thing. I would look for a healing modality, which not necessarily peak states, but if you like, yes, you're welcome. But the one requirement I would suggest is that healing modality actually brings you to a calm, peaceful, and emotionally light state when you use it. So when you have an upset, when you have a pet peeve, when you have an emotion, when you have panic or something, use a healing technique which brings you to a complete, calm, peaceful, and light state. Because that basically shows that part of the factory has been repaired.
Yeah, but you're talking about calm, peaceful, and light, and just that specific feeling that you have, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, and eventually it will be basically the underlying feeling of everything. So you wake up calm, peaceful, and light, and then we'll do your day, and then there will be something coming up, and then you do the technique, and then you'll be back to calm, peaceful, and light, and you just do your day, and then there will be another trigger, and then you will just do your technique, and you become calm, peaceful, light again, and then you continue your life this way. I don't think we will have the luxury to just have always calm, peaceful light. Perhaps these guys in research will find a way to get rid of most of the traumas. Then that would be one day a reality. But until then, we can wait. But basically, waiting would be suffering a little bit, right? Because the trigger will be so much emotion, will be horrible, will be so much alarm in the factory. So I would suggest using these tools right now. That's a very pragmatic way, because that's the thing we can do. To be calm, peaceful, and light most of the time, because it feels nice.
I'm sure, and I'm sure everybody wants that. That's why we do these things. I think that's great. I would like to add one last thing to that, to anyone listening. If you start doing any of this work, these techniques, this learning to love yourself, learning to be kind to yourself, don't give up. Just don't give up, because at first it feels like you're not doing anything. It doesn't make sense to your inner world, to your inner experience. I'm speaking from experience as somebody who tends to be more self-critical about these things. And I was fighting with parts of myself about, I can't do this. There's something wrong with me. I'm broken. I'm different than everybody. And over time, and more importantly, if you can do this consistently, just like you would working out or starting to eat healthy or any of these things, it's not so much about just spending 4 hours a day. It's just about being consistent. The more, if you can do it for 5 days in a row, I promise you, by day 5 or 4, you'll start understanding what we're talking about. And it just takes consistency and trust in that uncertainty. That's the difficult part, the uncertainty. So it's pretty wild what you can do when you just become a little consistent. So start there. If you think that what we're talking about is just doesn't make sense, it's not what you've learned, it's not what you've seen, not what you read. Daniel, thank you so much for, again, your insight and just talking about these things.
Words, Sergio, thank you very much for that big, good, incredible remark. It's a gold nugget. So please, everybody, listen to Sergio, what he just said. Be consistent, stay on the path, and thank you very much, Sergio. Okay,
well, if anybody's interested in anything that we talked about, feel free to comment, tell us any questions you have. Or reach out to us. We're more than happy to chat. So Daniel, it's always a pleasure, and I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you very much, Sergio. Bye.
Bye. Take care.